Thank you, Charles. And oh, thank you, Charles.
Evening, everybody. Well, I was just going to say welcome everybody, first of all, to another fantastic Agile expertise meetup. Thanks as ever to Agile, expertise recruitment, I should say, and thanks to, we have Ben here this evening actually joining us, which is absolutely fantastic. So thanks, Ben, for coming along and supporting everybody here this evening. I want to introduce again a great friend, somebody I've known for a long time, Mr. Alkesh Shah, who this evening is actually going to share with us his presentation and talk on effective DevOps teams. So, Alkesh, over to you.
Thank you, Charles. Hopefully this is going to be of interest and fun for people. It's very interactive, so we'll get on with it. Hopefully those who are attending aren't expecting a technical DevOps talk. This is more about Agile and the kind of behavior and culture that's needed to make a really good, effective team. We will touch a little bit on the loop and well, see how we go along. Okay, why listen to me? Those who don't know me, who are new to this, let me just quick bit of background. I have, it's a little out of date now, it's just over 40 years in IT. And I back that experience really with qualifications from almost every kind of badging company that's out there, including SAFE. And an MBA. So I practice a lot of the behavior and culture models that I learned in there, alongside the Agile tuition to help people become being Agile rather than doing Agile. I hate this kind of prescriptive method that people tell you what you should do and suddenly the world's a better place. I focus a lot more on sort of why and what kind of behaviors we can exhibit in one another. I'm an IBM thought leader for Agile, and recently left them to move to PA Consulting as a principal consultant in the Agile workspace. So that's hopefully that means that they might have something worthwhile listening to. At the bottom of every slide is my email address and LinkedIn. Please do get in touch. I love sharing with and talking to like-minded people, other Agilists. So on to today's talk. So today we're going to cover the behavior and cultural angles, as I said. I'd like to leave you with a few things. So do make sure that you take a note of some of the bits and pieces that I'm talking about and try and put into practice literally from tomorrow. It is a very interactive session. That means it's the engagement is ideal. So the more engaged you are, the more you'll get out of it. The chat will be used as well as we'll drop you out into Google Jamboard, and maybe some other websites. But because we're going to use the chat for the input, if you have any questions, can you please prefix them with question marks or something clear for Giles to be able to identify what's a question and what's just general chat.
Thanks, Alkesh.
That'd be really good. Thank you. Okay, so on to today. So we're talking about teams, and for me, teams are very much like a soundboard. So music, a sound mixer. In that, I mean that imagine in your team, and I'm sure you've come across this within teams, somebody's really vocal, very loud, others are very, very quiet. And you don't really get that harmony, that understanding of how the team can really click together. If you get that harmony right, then you can listen out with a business ear. You know, you can listen out for what's needed, how it needs to improve, what you need to do, and work together to get there. Going on from there, we're talking about the anatomy of what makes a good, effective team. Now, True Agile says there are no specific roles. Everybody should be cross-functional, T-shaped, E-shaped, whatever flavor you like. But the idea is they should be self-organizing and self-disciplined. I don't think that's the case for software delivery lifecycle. Ideally, you need to think about having enough specialisms so that you can do end-to-end delivery. Now, some of these specialisms don't always have to be there. I mean, there's an example on the board now, there's 8, and the optimum size, according to Harvard now for a team is 4.6. So you're looking at about 5-6 people. Some of these people can come in and out as you need them. For example, architect. You might want the architect up front when you're designing to share some ideas and make sure it's going to work, and towards the end when you deploy. But he doesn't have to be there all the time. But it's just an example. The idea is that the developers will work with each other. They'll review each other's code to meet standards. They can pair program, etc., and hopefully lift the skill so that over time, enough of the shared knowledge is around to be able to do end to end always, even when people are away. But the goal really is to be able to do this without dependency on other teams. And that's the hardest bit to do. It's no good having this agile develop at pace and then keep hitting walls because you've got to wait for another team to approve or change or move or whatever, which is where DevOps comes from. So I'll show you that. Okay, but this on its own doesn't make, for me, a high-performing team. What makes a high-performing team is when the teams have passion, when they really believe in the product that they're producing, they've bought into the idea, they've built it themselves. When they empathize with pain points or any issues that they're trying to overcome, it's not just solving a solution or providing a solution to a problem, it's actually understanding what that problem is. I know people say, step in somebody's shoes. What I'm talking about is walking a mile in their shoes, actually really understand what that means. Be creative and innovative. So the team need to come up with the solutions with their own expertise. They mustn't be given a solution. A product owner who says, I want this and I want you to do it this way is not a good product owner, and it's certainly not what the business could benefit from. Ideally, it should be saying, this is the next piece that we want to get done, and the team can come up with solutions. Listen and understand pain points. This is slightly different to empathizing. What this is saying is, quite often we'll build something exactly as somebody wants it, but it doesn't get used. Because the one thing we've forgotten to do is to check how it might be used. So we have to concentrate a little bit and work with customers to understand what their pain points are, what's wrong with the current way they're doing it or using or whatever they're trying to achieve. And when we build something as a solution, it can overcome those. It's a bit like meeting their desired need rather than just their expected need. Collaborative, make sure that the team can work together, not only collaborate within each other, but well with the business. Talk to the product owner, talk to the customers directly if you can. The more collaboration that you have across the organization, the better the quality of the product is going to be and better trust gets built. And manage expectations. If you can't do something in a certain time period, say so, because that helps predictability. It helps the organization to understand what you can and can't do when, and again, helps build that trust. That, for me, if you bring all of that together, makes a compassionate team. And that compassion helps you become high performing. Remember, I said if you empathize with the customer and the closer you work with them, the better the quality becomes. I'm sure you probably exhibit some of these in your teams already. So have a think about which of these attributes you exhibit now, and maybe there are more. These are just some that I think are essential for a team to work well, but you might come up with more yourselves. Why am I telling you this? Well, I want to take this team's much higher than high performing, a step further than high performing, if you like. And so John Whitmore in his Coaching for Performance book puts this across really well in developing a new culture and high performing. What he says is there are people who live in these first two phases, which is impulsive and dependent. You've probably heard them in your organizations. These are people who say things like, it's always the same around here, or I'm just going to do as I'm told. What's happening with these people is their environment is holding them back. They probably do want to do better, or at some point they stuck their head above the parapet and said, yeah, I think we should do something different, and got shot down. That's why we call it interference. Those people who exhibit some of those values that you just saw on the previous screen, they become high performing, but they're very independently high performing. And that's really where we got to with the previous slide. What I want to get to, and what John Whitmore says, is if we all work together and realize that we can achieve a lot more together by exhibiting those values, then the potential goes through the roof and we achieve a lot more together. I see this often as well like a 5-lane motorway. Imagine that we have a 5-lane motorway and there's traffic flying down it. that's our work. Work's going really, really well. When the environment kind of leaves it alone too long and expects too much, the lanes sometimes get thickets growing on the sides, and you narrow that 5 lane down to 3, maybe even 2. When that happens, work slows down because it's now bottling up. And when that lead time gets longer and longer, management step in, and the first thing they tend to do is say, call in the consultants, fix our teams, make them agile, make it go quicker. When the reality is it's not actually the teams that are at fault. They're frustrated. They may have even moved themselves back down to dependent or impulsive. What's happening is the environment needs to fix. They need to think about how they're working with their people to be able to move them back into this independent, interdependent state. So have a think about that too. Imagine what it feels like when you're operating in that interdependent state. It really is paradise. I've worked in a few places that have ended up like this. It's taken some time. New startups, they tend to always hit into this space because they don't have that environmental interference, if you like. So do you recognize any of these behaviors in the people? I'm sure you do. Some dependent, some independent, but they exist. A reason for all this is really culture eats strategy for breakfast. Organizations come up with all of these fantastic ideas, ways of fixing this, calling in expensive people to, McKinsey might tell you a new model that you should follow and all of this, and everything's gonna be wonderful. But what destroys it is that the habitual behavior of the people that forms that culture will always stop that working. And Peter Drucker said this many years ago, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So everything I'm telling you today, and most of my talks are around this kind of stuff, is making you think about how people react with each other and how we can engender a better culture from doing this kind of stuff. So I'm going to play some really horrible music in a second and give you a chance to put in the chat window, what other attributes have you seen successfully work? So think about the teams that you've been working in and think about yourselves even. What do you exhibit that you've seen has been really successful? So in the chat window, please.
Fantastic. Great ones coming in. Great to see everyone adding them in. Great things to share with you in a minute, Alkesh.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, let's give that a go. What have we got, Giles?
Okay, so back up the list. We start with Sven's got pragmatism. Omar's got trust. Sven's come back in again. Simplicity. Again, Omar's come back in with psychological safety, something that you and I are both passionate about and often share at these types of events. Christina shared honesty. Marcos has got trying to lead by example. A few people will be interested and get into it. John's come back with trust, developed shared responsibility. Catherine's got openness. Another one I like. Sven's come back with ignoring office politics. Brilliant.
Yes.
Alistair's come in with kindness. Ara has come in with letting go. Alistair has come back in with enthusiasm. And we've got Christina with reliability. Sven, good coffee. I agree. That has to be there. We got courage from Rohit. Edification. Great phrase from Alistair. Tim's got calm listening. So key.
Yes.
Obviously. Dylan's come in with collaborative. John's come in with each member desiring total team success. And Tim has come back with integrity. And then we've got Jean or Jean, apologies, I'm not sure where from. And we have vision, which is awesome.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody.
That's a brilliant mix. Thank you. So we're going to cover quite a number of those, apart from maybe edification. I need to work that. But but most of that, absolutely, because it is very much about shared ownership, shared collaboration towards a vision, trusting one another, being open, honest, courage, all of the Scrum values that we talk about all the time. Fantastic, thank you. So why am I telling you that working with each other at this degree and this value sharing is important? Well, here's a few stats. This is telling us that this is an old stat actually, and this is a European stat. The UK is actually worse. It used to be 52%. Now with COVID and us working from home and not having a start or finish properly for many people, this number is probably significantly more. But what I want you to think about is you spend more time with your work colleagues than you do with your friends, family, or asleep. Let me just repeat that. You spend more time together with work colleagues than you do with friends, family, or asleep. That's shocking. Well, it's nice having a work family, but you know, this is critical that you know your work family and you know it well. Okay, so as I say, this is an old stat. People will come and go, and as people come and go, you will go through that regular forming, storming, norming before performing, and people will fall back into that sort of storming, norming as new people come in. But you know, the more of those values that you exhibit within the team, the less likely that storming is going to last too long. Okay, coming on to that, talking about how teams understand each other. Let's look at this. So one of the methods that the dev team should do is create a social charter. If you've not done one before, this is an exercise of how you can do this remotely. So first off, it's something that you need to start at the beginning, but it doesn't matter if you're already running, create it. And what I would ask you to do is always keep coming back to it. So after a retrospective or two, come back to this and say, do we need to add to it? Do we need to change it? You know, are we exhibiting the values? So what you do basically is just ask the team, don't show them anything and don't talk about any of these kind of values. Ask them what they think they would like to see in the team. So how do they want to work with each other? Much like you guys have just said, you wanted trust, openness, honesty, all of those kind of things. Yep. See what they come up with, and then ask them to turn them into value statements. The reason I say that is because some words can mean different things to different people. Trust is fairly straightforward, but respect isn't. Respect can mean lots of different things. So ask them to turn them into a value statement. And then the team agree, and they either give it a thumb up that they agree and that becomes one of our values, or they say, I kind of agree, but I'd like to add something to it. Notice we never have a thumb down because we don't want to turn people off doing this stuff and we want to respect each other to do it. So it's either yes or yes, but. Okay. And if there are many, and I've done this before with a team of 8, I ended up with like 30 odd different values. Many of them overlap. They were just pouring out on Post-its. So what I did was I took the top 10 and got them to vote which ones they wanted with the top 10. But you don't have to do that. And then revisit them, as I say, regularly. One thing I'll give you that really worked well for me was check in and check out. If you've not done these before, these are fantastic. Very first thing of the day, start with a check-in. It takes a few seconds. If you're physical, which you know, offices, remember those things we used to go to. Hopefully one day we'll be going back to them, and at there it's a lot easier. But you can do it virtually. Ask everybody how they feel. It sounds silly, and we do this regularly anyway. Hi, how are you? Type thing. So it only takes a few seconds. But if you get somebody with modesty says, oh, I didn't get any sleep last night because I've got a new baby in the house, as you know, and it's a nightmare. Then the rest of the team know what to expect of that person the rest of the day. Okay, if you don't have that check-in, what could happen is that other people might think, what's the matter with him? He's a bit moody today, not getting much out of him, you know, and that damages the team. So to keep the team integrity and to keep that openness and honesty, think about doing this. Couple of minutes, fantastic. It's valuable for the day. Check out is at the end of the day, if you get time to, that can help too, because some people kind of have too much on their to-do list. They feel demoralized because they didn't quite finish everything. And doing a quick checkout could say, somebody could say, well, actually, that's fantastic. What you produced, I was able to use straight away, or I can see you're reloaded. Let me help you. A little bit like the daily stand-ups, but this is, we're talking a couple of minutes, not a whole 15 minutes and not tied to work. This is a check-in and check-out of how you feel. Okay, so this is very personal. How are you? Okay, as an experienced example, I'll show you. There's one that I did with a team in a big petrochem, and they came up with these, which is really, really good. But one of them was really bad, which was fun. After a couple of reviews where they didn't have too much to show, or it wasn't finished, we replaced fun with focus. Now, I didn't force these on them, and most of these were really much the Scrum stuff. I didn't give them any of this. They just came up with it themselves of how they'd like to work with each other, and they're typical value statements. What I would say, if you're a Scrum Master or if you're directing one of these, watch what people vote or say. By that I mean, if somebody says, I think it's important to have a voice, then it could be that they come from an environment where they weren't given a voice. Okay, if that's the case, then in your ceremonies, events that you do, make sure that person's voice is heard. Give them a little bit of extra airtime. Encourage them to speak, because this kind of exercise can draw out a lot about how people behave and what they're doing. So watch what people are voting for. The more overlap you have with those values to the Scrum Guide values, then the more likely the Scrum is going to work for you. It's a given. But what you got to be careful of here is don't force any of these on. So if people haven't said openness or courage, for example, don't kind of give it to them. Let them discover that over time. Okay. So in your retrospectives, maybe even steer it. But the more of these that you have, the more success your Scrum will be. Talking about understanding people also comes to Dr. Curtin's work. Dr. Curtin, over some 60 odd years, had discovered that we have creativity in each and every one of us. Again, you've probably recognized some people in these. At one end, you've got innovators. Innovators are ideas people. They're like airy-fairy, head in the clouds all the time. They're just thinking about idea, never understanding how any might actually turn into reality. At the opposite end, you've got adapters who are very methodical, very structured, very disciplined, but they're slow, as the tool suggests, that they might use 4 lines to draw a box, for example. And if you came along and said, there's a box tool to do that, it's quicker, they'll get stressed. No, I know what I'm doing, I know how to do it. I'll repeat doing things over and over for other people because I'm just that kind of person. Now they're extremes, okay? But what happens, and what Dr. Curtin proved, is that anywhere along that continuum, and you get on this continuum, by the way, doing some psychometric tests from him, but what they do is they position you somewhere along this scale. If you're more than 20 points adrift from somebody else, you will have a personality clash. You will, and for an example of DevOps, you're looking at, say, a Java backend developer in his little cave typing away, doesn't want to be disturbed. That's what he's doing. And then you've got the UX person who is very loud, brash, like kind of excitable, speaks to the customer a lot, and color is critical to him, and the look and feel. And they clash because the Java guy thinks, you don't understand my world. What you're asking for takes a bit of time to develop. And conversely, the other person's thinking, why are you making it so techy? This is what it needs to look like, and quite often I've seen that kind of a clash. Things to watch out for is wherever you are on that continuum, people will see you as different kinds of things. Okay, so you could be accused of holding things back or accused of being too innovative, if that's such a thing. So understand personality clashes happen and why they happen and how you could manage it. Now, there are floaters, people who recognize that this is happening and become the go-between. So if you're a Scrum Master again, or if you're working in a dev team and you see this kind of stuff happening, try and get them to understand each other's point of view and bring it together, because you need to work together for all the things that I've said up to now. So in the chat window, and I won't play any hideous music, in the chat window, what frictions have you experienced? What I've given you a few there, and we'll give you a few more in a sec, but what sort of things have you found?
I don't know. Good countdown timer here. Alkesh might.
Do you want me to? Okay then.
We need this, the gamification of it.
It's more for the game. Come on, the more you type. Okay, so
great stuff.
We've had a few things come in.
We do. So let's start at the top. We have from Rohit, we have interpersonal. So John has come up with too many experts, too little collaboration. I like Toby's cliques within the team. That is so common. Christina, brilliant one. Lack of empathy. Love it.
Yes.
Great one added here by Dylan. Dismissive of other opinions.
Yes.
Tim's come in with fixed viewpoints. We then have Ara coming in with people are not saying they can't do something. People not saying they can't do something. John's got no shared vision.
Yep.
Marcus has come up with lack of participation within the process. Do it my way.
Yeah.
We've got Ben coming up with tech vision versus business vision. Brianna has come up with organizational culture crisis killing the team. Wow, absolutely. And Ara's come up with solutions proposed, not scalable.
Yeah.
And we've got a question. I don't know whether you want to save the questions now, or there's a few that are happening going up through, or we wait till the end. It's up to you.
Yeah, if you think they're going to be reasonably quick, I'm conscious of the time for this, but happy to do Q&A at the end. What do you think, Giles?
I don't mind. Should we save these questions, the ones that are prefixed with the question mark to the end? We've got from Brianna, we've got lack of ownership being added in, which means I'll come back to Marcus's and Sven's questions they've added in here at the end.
Thank you.
And from Jean, we've got unwillingness to take calculated risks for long-term success.
Yes.
Fantastic.
It's interesting. Those people that aren't willing to take risks or have a fixed mindset, if you think about that curtain adapter scale where they fit, it's quite easy to see that they're perhaps more on the left of the page. They're fixed in their way, and it's difficult to get them to change. But things are changing underneath them. The one thing we know about Agile is we need to learn to respond to change. And yeah, that's fantastic. Cliques is a good one as well. I've seen again a lot of examples of that. Several of you seem to have gone the same way, which is fixed mindsets, fixed opinions, dismissive of other people's opinions. Yeah, and empathy we're going to touch as well. Yeah, this is really good. Fantastic. Okay, so why does this happen? Let's have a think about, and I'm sure you've come across this, guys, where people talk to each other and they just don't seem to get a message across. Have you come across that? So let's say, for example, I'm explaining something to Giles and Giles is just not getting it. He's looking at me as blank expression. So imagine two developers doing this. And I'm like, keep explaining, and I get louder and I'm still saying the same thing. I get louder and slower, and the guy's just not getting it. Giles is just still staring at me as if I'm from Mars. Alistair comes along and says what I think is exactly the same as what I just said to Giles, and he gets it straight away. And he's like, he walks away happy, and I'm standing there thinking, Alistair, but you said exactly the same words that I did. Why is he listening to you and not me? And this is a theory, man, that I think results in it. It's a bit of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, there are different ways in which people talk, different wavelengths that they're on. So are you speaking the same language? Not in English. I'm talking about same language, same wavelength. And I'll give you three. There are several, but I'll give you three here. The three ones are auditory, visionary, and kinesthetic. So these are the joined up words, not the subject. So when you're talking to somebody, so like I was talking to Giles, I was telling him about the subject that I needed to talk to him about, but the connecting words were out of sync with him, which meant that he was listening to a lot more being said than he needed to, and it was sounding confusing to him. He just wasn't getting it, and that's the problem. So visionary people would be people like say that they'd say things like, "Picture this," or "I need to show you something," or "Look." Yeah. Whereas auditory people would be saying, "That rings a bell. Yeah, I've heard it all before. That sounds great. I want to tell you something." Yeah. And kinesthetic people are people like, "That's not to my taste," or "We've hit a brick wall," or "Yeah, something smells bad." You know, it can also be physical. So you'll have, like, again, I don't want to stereotype people, but you find the Italians are quite animated when they talk. They use their hands a lot. They're very, very busy, whereas Germans tend to be more straight-laced. They don't use their hands as much. And so the Germans looking at the Italian, and the Italian's trying to explain something. The Germans are like just not getting it. The Italian's sitting there saying, "I don't know if you understand me." There's no expression, and the Germans sitting there thinking, "I'm just watching your hands. I'm not listening to you. There's too much going on." And that's what it is. It's just not getting on the same wavelength. When you walk with somebody and talk, I know we have to do it 2 meters apart at the moment, but in the past, when we used to work closely together, we'd end up taking steps together so that our heads are bobbing up and down in sync. We naturally try and synchronize when we're talking, but sometimes we don't synchronize when we're listening to the words. So have a think about that. So onto effectiveness of a team. Now, here we're going to jump over to Jamboard to play a game about DevOps, the DevOps loop. You're going to go there and you're going to see this. And what I'd like you to do, all of you can do this at once, is grab an icon, any one of these, and move it to any of these 8 stages. So DevOps, bringing development and operations together so that we can get things out the door without hesitation, instead of the old days where dev built something, chucked it over the wall to get operations to deploy it as and when they felt necessary. Now we can do it on the fly, get the feedback quicker. So,
okay. Are you going to be able to just copy that link for us into the chat window a second?
Yes, sorry.
That's all right. No, thanks for that.
A second. Where's the chat gone?
In your, no doubt, your little menu.
Oh, it's. Okay.
Is it not under more?
Nope,
It is,
nope,
but
can't do it.
It's not appearing. That's really weird. How do I do it? I'm going to the chat window, but it's not actually showing me the chat window. Oh, here we go. That just took some time. Apologies. There you go. There's the link. Go to the link.
Brilliant. Thanks.
No worries. I should have done this before. Apologies. Let me just get back to what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen and go to the link myself so you can see what you're doing. So Giles, can you still see my screen?
Yes. Yeah, brilliant.
Excellent. So we've got a few people. We've got a bird and a, yeah, just put them where you think they need to go. And feel free to move somebody else's if you think it's in the wrong place. Oh, sorry, I should be playing music here. Come on.
There we go.
This is true. Oh no, don't move the thing.
Your Jamboard has descended into a realm of chaos.
Okay, well, that was a little. Let's give it a second more because you're nearly there. So planning, building, then code. Okay. So team, are you? Let's go
Looking
back.
forward to you correcting us all.
Let's go back to the room and see. Well, let me talk about this. So planning is pretty much the first thing you would do. That's pretty good, right? Building and coding is an interesting one. You'd build something before you've coded it. I think it would be the other way around. You code it and then build it, then test it.
Well, doesn't that depend if you need to architect it so you can code it? If you need to...
That would come under the planning, would it not? So in this loop, we're talking about planning, designing, all of that in that phase there, and then coding what you've decided you're going to do as a solution, then build it, which is compiling it, testing it. That's testing end to end. Of course, you'd be testing it unit in the coding, and then the releasing and deploying. That usually is a contentious one, but that's the kind of right way around. And then you'd operate it and monitor what's happened. Let's go back to my deck. Let's go back. Okay.
In my experience, a lot of the testing takes place after we've released it.
Yeah, there's also end user. Well, there's end user testing before the release, but sometimes there is some testing that has to happen beyond. But hopefully, in most cases, to get the ops team to buy into what you're doing, you do enough testing on the dev side, so that and as much with real data as well, so that you can prove to the ops team, who should be part of your team but tend not to be, that they will buy in and let this be released. Release before deploy, because they're separated. You'd release it to another environment, say the user acceptance testing environment perhaps, and then move on to deploying it as and when the market's ready. Once it's deployed, it's then in an operate and monitor state to feed back into planning.
Alkesh, I don't know whether you're showing your presentation or the screen. We've still got the Jamboard up at the moment.
Oh, sorry, is that better?
Yep, brilliant.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't find how to get back to it. So that's what we had. This is what the finished would look like. So as I say, planning, then coding, building, then testing, up to release, then deploy, operate and monitor. What do I mean by that? Well, engaging across the DevOps is what we're trying to do. Quite often you'll get in a dev team somebody who's very focused on the piece they're working on. So there'll be a tester perhaps, or there'll be a coder, a back end or whatever. What we're trying to think about is, and again, you guys have all said this in the last two rounds of input, we want people to own and share a goal. So we want everybody in the team to share the end goal. So is it a sprint goal or whatever it is that they're working towards? But with that shared goal, in order to get things over the line, they need to help each other. Now, if this was a Kanban and going through the different phases, if it would use WIP numbers at the top to say how much you can get into a particular phase before it creates a bottleneck, what you'd then do is say all the previous people, instead of adding more, stop and start helping in the other phases as much as you can to get it through. So for example, you've got one tester who's only able to do a couple of tests at a time. There's no point in 4 developers keep producing stuff for him. They need to produce just enough for him to test, and then they need to help him test some more. Now, they might not be as quick as him, but at least it gets it over the line. That's the goal. Everybody together owns the sprint goal. And that meets many of you said about shared ownership and shared stuff. But what the different phases are we're talking about is in the planning, we talk about a continuous planning. So these are the 6 C's. Continuous planning, meaning that you take the feed in from the monitoring from the previous time. So you've got that relentless improvement cycle, but you've also got a bit of design thinking. Remember I said about understanding pain points, understand what's really needed and how it's needed. What are you going to measure? How do you know that it's going to be delivered to that standard? So think about acceptance criteria and definition of ready to bring it in. Then in the development itself, think about how you're going to do this. It's traceable. It's you have a single branch for different coding to come back into a central place so that everybody's working off the latest copy. You can put some rules in that say once a day by 6 p.m. You have to have submitted your code, otherwise it's going to be out of date. Things like that. You can build some management in. But it's all about dashboards, traceability, testing as much as you can. And the testing itself is sanity testing, regression testing. A lot of this can be automated as well. One thing with DevOps we talk a lot about is trying to automate anything that's repetitive. That allows the team to free up to do the innovative stuff. Get where cognitive necessity is more around solutioning and finding out what the problems are really with the customer. All the rest of the stuff, it should be automated. And if you look up behavior-driven development, that's a good technique, which is talking about how we're going to test what we're going to build. It's the other way around. It's not build it then test it. It's actually thinking about how is it going to be used. And it's written in an English format, which is called Gherkin, like, given that I do this, this will happen and this will happen. So given that I press this button, this will pop up as a field and this will get populated. And the reason for writing that is you can then feed that into automation tools like Selenium if you're doing web-based work. And what that will do is it will run through that script. So architecting those kind of tests up front can make the whole thing a lot smoother. Continuous release and deployment, as I say, separating the two so that you can deploy on demand. Again, it's another agile techniques talking about let's build it as quickly as you can, let's do it iteratively, and let's try and get it out the door, not every 2 weeks, not every week, as and when it's needed. So as soon as it's ready to go out. So you have a 2-week sprint or a 1-week sprint, but you can still deploy on the fly every day. Now, if you think that sounds mad, Netflix, Amazon, people like that, Google, they're releasing in seconds. A new release of some part of their system every few seconds. Once it's out, you then operate it and monitor it. So the continuous monitoring is about checking the health and sanity of it as it's running. So it's not just you build it and forget about it. If we bring in ops into the model, then you need to build it and parts of your team need to look after the ongoing maintenance of it. It's not the support calls, that can be done with somewhere else. This is about continuity. The reason I say build this into your team is think about it. Once it's out, if somebody wants a new feature, who are they going to go to? It's going to end up with the dev team at some point. If they want a bug fixed, who's it going to go to? The dev team to fix it. If they want an enhancement, who's it going to go to? The dev team. So it makes more sense to do it straight off, monitor what's happening, keep that continuous loop going with the customer, and keep giving them what they need. And that's where the feedback and optimization comes in. Listen to the customer, monitor what they're doing with it, how they're using it, how the business has changed and they may need enhancements, and keep ahead of it. DevSecOps, you might have heard of. This is where it's DevOps, but with security. And so there's a continuous security practice that goes all the way around this. And I'm happy to go into more detail in the interest of time, but think about from planning up front, making sure the architecture is in place, you're compliant with the non-functional requirements like Sarbanes-Oxley if you're doing financial stuff, or GDPR for privacy. Think about how vulnerable the code is. If you're using third-party code or library off the internet, containers from other people, how open are they? Are they potential to change or carry something that might damage you? Containerizing the work that you do allows you to then accelerate what you're developing. It can be much smaller rather than having banks of hardware everywhere to try and have to maintain. And protecting from attacks, you can test yourself Netflix has a cyber monkey test where they literally just unplug servers whilst they're running. They just go around and randomly unplug things and see how many seconds it takes to get back up and running. And that kind of chaos monkey, I think they call it. It's worth looking up on the net. It's brilliant, the testing that they do. Intrusion detection testing and prevention is from release and deploy, thinking about how other people might infiltrate what you're doing, how did they get to it, and runtime application self-protection is once it's operating, can it look after itself? Can it protect? And then there's obviously the security information event management, SIEM they call it, or web firewalls, depending on the type of coding you're doing. Those are where the monitoring comes in to say, what are we going to do when we have a breach? How do we manage this? And it can be very expensive. You hear every day banks getting some ridiculous fines in the millions for breaches of security of data. There are many tools that are in use across this, and they're constantly changing. There's a new tool literally every minute around the world. And there's a site that I'll send you to have a look. Again, let me just copy that to the chat. You don't have to do this now. This is just literally just to. This is a fantastic site. Okay, and back to. So I'm going to go to the site and show you quickly what this looks like. Now, what this site does is across the top here, it says whether you're configuring, whether you're looking at servers, whether you're deployment, doing containers, etc. And whatever you click on, so if you're cloud-based, maybe you want to do testing, and it shows you which applications on this periodic table would suit you. Okay, and if you click on any one of them, say like Jenkins, it brings up a page that takes you to it tells you a bit about the orchestration tool. In this case, you click on the website to go to Jenkins site. Usually you can download a free trial. It also tells you what else you could look at. So GitLab, for example, has now got some of the orchestration tools built in to automatically go round the loop. And there are other alternatives there. It's a fantastic site. If you've not seen it before, go there. ZBA have put this together. Have a look at that link. We're steering back to our behavior and culture side of DevOps. It's the Scrum Master. It's probably one of the most important pieces of the dev team. The Scrum Master has 3 jobs, as you see on the left there. Uphold the Agile principles and values and practices and make sure that the team are adhering to them. Help remove impediments, but help remove, not move them. They must help the team to be able to learn what to do, how to do it, to get rid of as much as they can, because their ultimate goal really is to become redundant. And protect from interrupts. Now, I know there's a lot on LinkedIn, a lot on different forums talking about what does the Scrum Master really do, or does he have to protect? In my view, they do kind of shield a little bit from some of the noise from bad product owners or multiple bits of the business, because if you think about how much time they have in a sprint and you take out all the ceremonies, the events, they have very limited time to be able to get on with their coding. So the last thing you want to do is keep interrupting them. Absolutely have the interconnection with the customer as much as you can, but be able to do the work. Scrum Master can help alleviate some of that. But I want to bring in a key role that they need to be is a servant leader. And we have a separate talk on this, but just to highlight a few key things. There are 10 characteristics, but 5 most important ones I think are Scrum Master needs to listen. They need to watch what's going on, listen to what's being said and what's not being said, more importantly, because sometimes the devs aren't going to tell you something's not working or something's not quite right, or there's a friction between people or between teams. And you need to watch and watch for that ear and listen to them. Empathize. Second one is think, empathize as much as you can with them. All of you guys said empathy a few times in the last 2 rounds that we said what you'd like to work and what can sometimes get in the way if you're not empathetic enough. Next one's be self-aware. A good Scrum Master knows how they are themselves and how they can regulate that kind of cognitive bias, if you like, or way they work around the team so that they can serve the team as best as possible. That brings us on to the next one, which is stewardship. They need to steer and steward the team, but not be managing them and not be leading them. I know managers on there somewhere, I argue with that. The last one is about building a community, which is getting the team's team spirit going, getting them all, have your retros in the pub when we are allowed to go back out, that is. Have your retros in the pub. People get more fluid with fluid. They'll open up a lot more if they can. Try and get them all to think about being the work family. All the first slides that I told you about, the necessity for them to understand how they work with each other is, they're a family. Make them a community and get them to share with that community with other teams so they can learn from each other, avoid the mistakes. Common pitfalls of a dev. When you have a combination of people and different kind of areas they work in, this happened for real for me at one team. I had a database modeler who wanted to model the entire solution, right? And we didn't even have the whole solution defined, but he wanted to map the entire thing. And everybody else was getting frustrated, and they ended up using stubs, which are in their code. They were having an expectation of what's going to come from the database model. And that's because the database guy was focused on the product goal, not the sprint goal. He was focused on, and why this happens with devs sometimes is that they are measured by their code. They think that the quality of their code is the most important thing. So they have to have a finished, polished result before they share it with anybody else. And what you need to do with your dev team is get everybody to know each other and understand each other and respect and love each other to the degree that you don't have to put those pretenses up, that you can just rough and ready, shortest, quickest way, get something to share with each other. And by that, I mean, get them to think about slicing. So this sprint goal is an integration goal that says, just do just enough. Yeah. Not too much that you're wasting it if it's not going to be what's needed, and not too little that you can't test it, but just enough to get everybody working together and get something out the door as quickly as you can. And this brings us back to the shared goal, which is the sprint goal. Have a clearly defined, well-formed sprint goal, beginning of the sprint, everybody buys into, and everybody works together to get there. Finally, talk about protecting them. I'm going to give you a model that is about stakeholder management. Now, what this one does is says that every stakeholder has an element of power, urgency, and legitimacy. So they either have the right, the power, or they have a sense of urgency. It's called the salience model if you look this up. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of these, but there are 8 distinct stages. Your sponsor would be number 1, because he'll have he or she will have enough power, urgency, and legitimacy. But some of the others, I want to draw 2 out. Somebody in position 2, for example, could be that they have the ear of the CEO or CFO, and they have a sense of urgency that's just not aligned with your sprints. They just want it now. That makes them a dangerous stakeholder. Now, dangerous in that they can just derail you, go off and buy something off the shelf or go buy something from another vendor. So if you're developing something and somebody you recognize is in that position, try and bring them into the center, give them a bit of legitimacy, or watch out for them, lessen their power or do something, but watch that person because they can be dangerous to your project. Another one I'll give you is say 3. 3 is a good one. 3 is where somebody has the power and the right, but they don't have a sense of urgency. This could be something like digital security. Imagine you're creating a web front end, And these guys say, okay, we need to do an intrusion detection test. That is, hire a third-party company to try and penetrate to see if it's secure enough that it's protecting the company. But they're going to book it for 3 months' time. That's not a lot of use to you, is it? Because they don't have a sense of urgency. They have the right and they have the power to stop you if it's a protection issue. So again, think about what's going to happen. Know that potentially that might happen. So talk to them and bring them either a sense of urgency or do something with them that says, look, you know, we need to get this out the door quickly. So planning ahead, at that point, we're going to need to detect intrusion detection test. Can you book it now? You know. So that's what I'm just going to give you. There are many more. If you do this exercise and you put people's names on here, be careful because nobody really likes to be called dangerous. But it is really useful to recognize the kinds of people you're dealing with, and that will help you make sure that this team that you've managed to get working together well stays well. Okay, that was leave enough time for questions. So quick takeaways, things to remember. Look for the non-technical interpersonal characteristics of the team. Make sure that you recognize that your working family, how it works together. You spend more time with them than you do friends, family, or asleep. Think about the values. Try and do a social charter and keep refreshing that social charter. Think about getting them to tell you what values they'd like to see in each other, and then question those in your retrospectives. Are they adhering to them? Do we need to add to them? Understand that different characters are involved. So think about the Dr. Curtin work and why people perhaps don't communicate with each other quite as well, and try and help float between them. Get them on the same wavelength if you can. A floater is somebody who can listen to those extra words and change the auditory to visionary, etc., whatever's needed in order to get the message across. Think about the sprint goal being the most important thing. The sprint iteration, if you're doing Kanban, whatever it is that you're doing, make sure that everybody agrees to what needs to get done and helps each other to get that done. Understand what's involved around the whole DevOps loop. I know some people believe in karma, which is the alternative way of explaining DevOps. That talks a lot about culture. What I've hopefully given you today is a lot about behavior that leads to that culture. Automate as much as possible, particularly testing. And practice being a servant leader. Encourage innovation, openness. Again, all of you said you'd love to see openness, trust, honesty. You know, build that trust. And finally, identify those stakeholders that might screw you up. Okay. Giles, that was whistle stop.
Brilliant. Another great talk this evening from you. So again, thank you very much. Now, we do have about sort of 7 or 8 minutes for questions before we wrap up this evening. And I want to go back, I think, up to the chat earlier on. I'm just going to look for the first one that had to the question mark. And I'm just scrolling through the chat. So the first one comes from Marcos. And I know he's dropped off, but hopefully, obviously, Brianna may be able to update him afterwards and let him know. How does the social charter accommodate the individuals who love being independent and not public or sharing about their personal lives, and yet they are very efficient and productive? So how does the social charter accommodate the individuals who love being independent and public or sharing about their personal lives?
That's interesting. For me, I don't know if you guys have read the Unicorn Project or Phoenix Project. They talk about a guy called Brent, who's the hero. Yeah. He's the one who does everything and he knows everything, and everybody has to go to him for everything. He thinks he's helping, but he's actually not. I think Jeff Sutherland, the father of Scrum, said, if you have a team where one person is is amazingly doing everything, and he's the person who does all the work, and the rest of them aren't doing anything, which one would you fire? The rest of them and replace them, or the one who's doing everything? What do you think? The answer is the person who's doing everything, because you need the collective power of the team to get it done. Just that one person doing everything isn't actually helping at all. It's not a team, it's a one person, which then brings you back to strongest opinion, all the things you said, like only one way of doing it is the only way of doing it, and all of those things get in the way. So for everything I've told you today about how important it is for the team to work as a team, it just doesn't make sense if you have that one person doing everything. So in a social charter, I think you would put values in that say about sharing and about upskilling each other and about supporting each other, getting to a point where this one person with all the power is disseminated.
Can I throw something in there?
Please, John.
I think that that one way to encourage that person who is reluctant is to give them a role that puts them in a position where they need to be a mentor. They need to be, so they have to put themselves out there in such a way that they become a part of the overall team in a specific role. It allows them to maintain their privacy and yet helps them be more part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes them feel important then still, but actually gets the team shared. Yeah, I like that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I'll add to Marcus's question, and a lot of what Marcus deals with is it's actually more like the teams aren't teams, they're work groups. They're people who are, for whatever reason, collectively put together, but don't actually share a common goal or a common interest. And so when you try to start throwing frameworks and Scrum on top, it gets very, very difficult because these individuals, they're never going to cross-train each other. They're not going to be cross-functional. And there's a reason, because they're a work group. They were put together for some random reason. Usually there was a nice thought behind it, but that never gets addressed. And then when you try to form charters or try to address what it means to have team cohesion, it's just not going to work. And how do you handle these highly independent principals who really don't have an interest in the well-being of a team or a collective interest?
It's a good point, Brianna. I think a lot of what I've said does talk about as if you've got long-lived teams, and that's the ultimate goal, ideally. But there are still companies out there that will pull people together just for a project or just for a piece of work. But in order for them to have the higher quality of what they're doing and how they work, how they're going to solution the work, maybe getting to understand each other and how they work, how each other work, is critical. And spending a little bit of time about that psychological side, whether you do it through a social charter or whether you do it in retros or in some kind of ceremonies that you're doing, is up to you, and that's the team. But the key thing is to get them to understand a bit more about each other for the sake of getting this out at a better quality. Does that make sense? It's not, but I appreciate what you're saying. Because they're tight against the time, and if they're just been put together to do a project, they're not interested in anything else. But if they want a good quality solution, then they have to think about how each other work.
Aren't we talking about being agile versus doing agile?
Absolutely.
It's a whole nother talk, all still to come. And we could do that. We could do just that one topic alone for like an entire day workshop. Okay, we've got one other question. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. So it's from Sven. This was raised earlier, and I think it's really important. The Curtin Innovator Scale. Aren't you looking for diversity and friction or clashes to increase lateral thinking?
Oh, you are, and absolutely, you need people across that whole spectrum, continuum. You wouldn't achieve anything if you had everybody at one end. In fact, how I came across this was I was up at the innovator end, and I had somebody else with me who was part of my peer group at the time, a coach, and she, we were given. Let me explain. So we had psycho tests, which put us into 3 groups. So we had a group of innovators, group of adapters, and a group in the middle. And 3 groups were given 1 word each and 15 minutes to come up with a strategy of something that they can sell to a dragon's den, which was made of 1 person from the middle, 1 person from each end. And my group did 3 A4, it got the word shoe. That's all it said, just shoe. And they did 3 A4 pages in literally about 5 minutes of ideas. And I'm like sitting there saying, look, we're running out of time. We need to take one of these ideas and discuss how it's going to be formed into something we can talk to the den about. And this woman got really aggressive with me about, no, we've not hit the idea yet. Another few minutes later, I'm thinking, right, now we've got 4 minutes left and we really need to stop, find an idea. And she got positively aggressive with me. Got to a point really, really difficult. And it was only afterwards when Dr. Curtin explained why we have, this, it realized that me and her were more than 20 points adrift at the top end of this scale. Conversely, people at the bottom end also came up with 3 ideas and they didn't get round to presenting because it's alien to them. We're asking them to think outside the box here, and they are box people. And the people in the middle obviously had a good collection of ideas and a really well polished presentation. And I guess what that's saying is that we need a mix of those both ends, but not extremes, and enough for them to work well together to come up with ideas. There was a living example of that happening.
Fantastic. And Alkesh, again, I just want to say from everybody else who's been here this evening, thank you very much for another enlightening and inspiring talk. And thank you very much to everybody who has obviously taken the time to come along.
Thank you, everyone.
This evening. And thanks again to everyone at Expertise Recruitment and obviously the Agile Expertise Group. And I look forward to seeing you all the same time next week. Not so red, normal situation, back in my normal office. So see you all soon. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So